Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank all those folks out there on Facebook Live for joining us today as we remember Martin Luther King Jr. and this day of service. I also want to thank all of our volunteer speakers that are here with us today and can't wait for you to hear them. But also, I want to thank all the community members out there who have given all this food behind us. This food will be going to our food pantry here in Jonesboro, and it will be making a difference in a lot of families' lives. And so we're very happy to participate in that today. And so, again, we're here to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. and his legacy. And if you've not been able to get out today to do something, remember we've got 11 more months during this year, and there's a lot you can do every single day, every single week to make your community better. Because how we make the world better is by making the person next to us feel good. It's about making the people in our lives feel better, helping the people in our community and in our town. And that's how we make our world a better place. And that was the dream that Martin Luther King Jr. had. And so I just want to thank everybody for what you've done today and what you continue to do. I want to introduce you to a man who also makes a difference here in the town of Jonesboro, and that's our Mayor, Chuck Vest. And he's going to he's going to say some thank yous and introduce some other folks. And again, thank you for joining us on Facebook Live, and I hope you enjoy today's program.
Thank you, Teresa. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here in the McKinney Center. This is always a special, place to visit, and it's always special to have a chance to make some opening remarks. It's even more special this year because, of course, we're back to celebrate Martin Luther King Day, and also to recognize the great work of our food pantry, and we get a chance to thank some folks for that here shortly. But I want to start with a quote from Martin Luther King, and it's, "The time is always right to do what's right." And when I read that, I was thinking, that's a pretty simple quote, but man, it's pretty dang powerful. And I said sometimes the simplest message is the one that offers us the most clarity, and even God's message is go out and do good. So I want to carry that forward, really, for all of us, and really in my own life. We're all, challenged to do what's right and do good for others. That's what brought me into public service to begin with. But as we look and, listen for today's leaders to, give us guidance and set examples for us, let's never forget that our past and these past leaders like Martin Luther King must always be utilized and always listened to, because we can learn from them and get guidance from them. So thank you for all we do today here in our community, but really thank you to all the past leaders here in Jonesboro and past leaders like Martin Luther King and others that have made our country such a beautiful place to live. Well, that's why we have really such a great facility here in the McKinney Center. This was put together really to be a place where our community could come together and do special things, and we do that. And it's also a place where we carry our past into the future. And Jonesboro's always been great at that, and this is what the McKinney Center is going to continue to do, going forward. So I want to thank the staff and the volunteers and really our community that really makes the McKinney Center so effective and such a special place. So thank you to everyone for that and for setting good examples for others to follow. And now I've got another special opportunity here to introduce Elmer Gillespie. We've got not just 677 pounds of food to give, but we've also got a donation from someone. I think it was $200 to go to our food pantry, Elmer. We appreciate all you do down there. You're a difference maker in our community, and we need more people like you. So let me introduce Elmer. leave that with you right there, since that's big money right there for our food pantry, and you'll do good stuff with it. Thank you.
On behalf of all those of us who work with the food pantry, I want to thank you for all the help that you give us, especially the mayor and all the board members. We get a lot of support, and we are thankful for that. On here in the program, it says, see how the food pantry speak on how the food pantry got started. Well, I started with the food pantry in 2002, and the Ministers Association, Jonesboro JAMA, which is the name of the pantry, food pantry, Jonesboro Area Ministerial Association. The ministers at that time did a lot of benevolent work, but they decided to just concentrate on food. And that's when I got involved with it, like in 2002. And the food pantry, there was already a food pantry at the Presbyterian Church. So they just made that, change it to the Ministerial Association Food Pantry. And we moved from there to the park where we are now. We were first in a recreation building. And when they built the new senior citizens, we got a spot in the new building. And it's really, it's so much difference. It's hard to describe it from what we had before to what we have now. And the other, it says, and how it helps the community. And I was trying to figure out a way to describe that. If you do picture, we have a lot of seniors, especially seniors, that come to the food pantry. Most of the people, I guess, who come to the food pantry are seniors. And one of the things that we do, we have an application you fill out, and on that application, it usually it has income. And you'd be surprised how many people have a $600, $600 a month income. If that person's 65, 70 years old, and they have a $600 a month income, well, $149 that's going to go for Medicare. But this picture, that's what they have to live on. So they end up at the food pantry, and at that age, they're locked in. Nothing's going to happen to make all of a sudden they're going to have a real windfall of money. They're locked in. And so we have a lot of people who are like that. And that's the people that when you donate or you give food, money, whatever you do, that's the kind of person you're helping. Because we have a lot of people who have families who have lost a job or whatever the reason is. And two, we have people who are underemployed. They're working, but they got 4 or 5 children, and they're both working at a minimum wage job, and it's just hard. It makes it very hard. So that's the kind of people that we attract. We over the last few years, we've been doing. In order to get food, you'd have to be a Jonesboro address, Telford address, or a Limestone address, which was the west side of the county. But since March, because of the pandemic, we're wherever they come from, we're serving whoever that comes to the pantry. And I can't think of anything else I need to say. We'd like to ask if you have a question to ask. I think a question about the pantry. I think it'd be better if I could answer a question instead of trying to. Anybody have anything that one particularly thinking about, or how it works, or?
If you want to donate food or help throughout the year, who should we contact?
Well, we can. You can bring we on every Wednesday we are at the food pantry to stock. We pick up food from Walmart and from Second Harvest and Food City on Wednesdays, and we're open every Thursday from 9 to 12, The second, third Thursday of the month, we're open also from 5 to 7 in the evening. So in those times, or you can call me, or but any one of the volunteers, especially the chairperson for the Ministerial Association now is Karen Lane, who's the pastor at the United Methodist Church. You could contact there, so, or you can you can call me. We'll get somebody to pick it up. Anything else? Okay.
My name's Sky McFarland, and if you don't know me, I work here at the McKinney Center, and you're just going to see me come up and wipe the microphone and introduce the next person. So next we will have Karen Sullivan, and she is going to read an excerpt from an MLK speech in 1963. So we'll hear from her.
This is an excerpt from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, "Our God is Marching On." Toward the end of the Reconstruction era, something very significant happened. That is what is known as the populist movement. The leaders of this movement began awakening the poor white masses and the former Negro slaves to the fact that they were being fleeced by the emerging Bourbon interests. Not only that, but they began uniting the Negro and the white masses into a voting bloc that threatened to drive the Bourbon interests from the command posts of political power in the South. Through their control of mass media, they revised the doctrine of white supremacy. They saturated the thinking of the poor white masses with it, thus clouding their minds to the real issue involved in the populist movement. They then directed the placement on the books of the South of laws that made it a crime for Negroes and whites to come together as equals at any level, and that did it. That crippled and eventually destroyed the populist movement of the 19th century. If it may be said of the slavery era that the white man took the world and gave the Negro Jesus, then it may be said of the Reconstruction era that the Southern aristocracy took the world and gave the poor white man Jim Crow. He gave him Jim Crow. And when his wrinkled stomach cried out for the food that his empty pockets could not provide, he ate Jim Crow, a psychological bird that told him that no matter how bad off he was, at least he was a white man, better than the black man. And he ate Jim Crow. And when his undernourished children cried out for the necessities that his low wages could not provide, he showed them the Jim Crow signs on the buses and on the stores, on the streets, and on the public buildings. And his children, too, learned to feed upon Jim Crow, their last outpost of psychological oblivion. Thus, the threat of the free exercise of the ballot by the Negro and the white masses alike resulted in the establishment of a segregated society. That's what happened when the Negro and the white masses of the South threatened to unite and build a great society, a society of justice where none would prey upon the weakness of others, a society of plenty where greed and poverty would be done away, a society of brotherhood where every man would respect the dignity and worth of human personality. Today, I want to tell the city of Selma, today I want to say to the state of Alabama, today I want to say to the people of America and the nations of the world that we are not about to turn around. We are on the move now. Yes, we are on the move, and no wave of racism can stop us. We are on the move. The burning of our churches will not deter us. The bombing of our homes will not dissuade us. We are on the move. Let us march on poverty until no American parent has to skip a meal so that their children may eat. March on poverty until no starved man walks the streets of our cities and towns in search of jobs that do not exist. Let us march on poverty until the wrinkled stomachs in Mississippi are filled and the idle industries of Appalachia are realized and revitalized. And broken lives in sweltering ghettos are mended and remolded. Let us march on ballot boxes. March on ballot boxes until race baiters disappear from the political arena. Let us march on ballot boxes until the salient misdeeds of bloodthirsty mobs will be transformed into the calculated good deeds of ordinary citizens. Let us march on ballot boxes until the Wallaces of our nation tremble away in silence. Let us march on ballot boxes until we send to our city councils, state legislatures, and the United States Congress men who will not fear to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. Let us march on ballot boxes until brotherhood becomes more than a meaningless word in an opening prayer, but the order of the day on every legislative agenda. Let us march on ballot boxes until all over Alabama, God's children will be able to walk the earth in decency and honor. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. from Montgomery, Alabama. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Up next, we will have Kenneth Bonner, who will be giving us a little information about Black history right here in Jonesboro, Tennessee.
Good evening. Washington County is home to a landmark case in the rights of people of color across the United States. I want to tell you the story of a court case, Ford versus Ford. The year was 1843. A few months before this date, the family involved in the court case were property, counted with the acreage and heads of cattle that were owned by Lord Ford Sr. of Jonesboro, Tennessee. But only until he died. After his death, Ford's slaves, Peg, Elwood, Rhoda, Lark, and John Ford, who had taken on their master's last name, were not convoyed to his relatives along with his land and estate, as was customary practice since the founding of this country. Usually slaves would be passed down to the herd. Usually they would continue their work until they died, not their owners. Usually that's how it worked. This time it didn't. It was unusual and became a landmark case regarding slaves and land ownership. When the family were granted their freedom as well as property by their former master and father, in his last will, Lord Ford Jr. claimed his slaves as his children and also made this claim with his good friends. In no other place had this happened. Some masters had set their slaves free in their wills. This was beyond that. They were set free. They were acknowledged as his children. They were granted land and property. Slaves owning land was unheard of, not to mention that all of this took place while there were relatives, white relatives, non-slave relatives, alive and angry and left out. This enraged his other children, in particular, Lord Ford Jr., who had not been to visit his father in many years and who had not stayed on to care for his ill father. Lord Ford Jr. fought the will. Peg and Elwood Ford and their family fought back. It was nearly unheard of for a person of color to be inside of a courthouse. By law, as people of color, they were not allowed to bring a civil suit of their own case or defend their right to remain on this land after freedom. Nor could they file suit to keep what was their rightful inheritance. The law stated they need to find a white person to stand in the role of next of friend to file a suit for them. This seemed an impossible task. But in this town, this was the first newspaper dedicated to emancipation. There were people who believed in the summary for all. They found someone who would stand in as next of friend, a white woman named P.B. Stewart. She was questioned by the opposing lawyer for her own motives and asked if she was close friends of the family or if she or her husband had outstanding debts that would be paid off for their own financial gain, expecting payment from the inheritance. P.B. Stewart, as the next friend, stated that she stepped into the role because she believed Mr. Ford had the right to leave his property to his other children. Believed they had the right to own it and had a right to their freedom to live freely on the land that was left to them as any other free person. According to court transcripts, the lawyer for the Free family stated, "Your Honor, we are here today to address two issues. One, mainly the ownership rights to the property left by the deceased Lord Ford Sr. to his children, his natural-born black children. And secondly, their right to own and live on property within the limits of Washington County, Tennessee." Mr. Robert Hale, a family friend of Lord Ford Sr., attested to the validity of the will, which was drawn up at his own home. Lawyers representing Lord Jr. tried to establish that his father was insane, that the Hales were untrustworthy, that the will was a forgery. One after another, the claims were proven false. Lawyers for each side made their final arguments, and it was now in the hands of the Washington County jury. At no other time in history had a case like this become before a court in the state of Tennessee or nowhere else in the United States. The members of the Washington County jury in the case of Ford versus Ford found that the will was void and the father upheld all the rights and grants provided in the will. This became a landmark case for the cause of slaves and freed slaves, not just in Washington County, Tennessee, and not just in the state of Tennessee, but would be the first major case in the United States that would look at the plight of slaves and their rights as people 20 years before the start of the Civil War. Though several appears over more than a decade, this decision stood, and Peg, Rhoda, Elwood, Lark, and John Ford all received their freedom and their land and remained victors in their case.
I forgot to mention that last piece was written by Jules Courier, who works here as well. I'm sure many of you are familiar with her, so thank you, Jules, and thank you, Kenneth. And next up, we have Brittany Butler, who will be reading an excerpt from the I Have a Dream speech.
The following is from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, August 28, 1963, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. And those who hoped that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But there's something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny, and that they have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote for. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down the waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Thank you.
And next we'll have Caitlin Yarborough, who has a special announcement for us.
The Junior League of Johnson City, in partnership with Scholastic Books and the Association of Junior Leagues International, have sponsored the building of Tybrae Falls Little Library of Big Ideas. Tybrae is a local hero from Johnson City, Tennessee, who first came to the public's eye in March of 2018 when he met his idol, John Lewis, in Selma, Alabama. From that moment, Tybrae and John Lewis formed a friendship that would be nurtured until the congressman's passing in July of 2020. There are such parallels between the work of Dr. Martin Luther King, Congressman John Lewis, and future generations of freedom fighters like Tybrae. Scholastic will be publishing a book in honor of all three heroes, written by Coretta Scott King award-winning author Andrea Davis Pinkney. Tybrae Falls Little Library of Big Ideas will be constructed by the 4th grade class of students at Ashley Academy in Johnson City. It will contain donated books from Scholastic that are free to be read and shared among the community. The Junior League will be holding a dedication event for Tybrae and the Little Library Sunday, February 21st. So save the date and mark your calendars. Tybrae is here with us today to celebrate the legacy of Dr. King and John Lewis. And we are so proud of him and his dedication to the continued fight for civil rights. John Lewis published the following after his death. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. With the spirit of those words in our hearts, we would like to present this picture to you, Tybrae, commemorating the Little Library, the struggles, the triumphs, the struggles and the triumphs of your idol, Representative Lewis, and we thank you for your continued service to progress and equality. This is for you.
Thank you so much. I can't tell you how excited I am to have this library named after me. in John Lewis's honor. He would be so proud. I know he would cry tears of joy. It means so much that kids in Johnson City will have access to free books that they can keep. I don't know if you know this, but the congressman couldn't even get a library card until he was 16. I mailed him mine as one to thank him for all he did. Every time I talked with him, he told me how important a good education is, and we all know reading is the key. I would be remiss if I don't pay tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. After all, it was through learning his story that led me here today. One of my favorite quotes from him has so much meaning in today's world. I've decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. So again, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to cut the ribbon at the opening.
Hi everyone, I'm Tyberee's grandmother, Lauren, and today we would like to donate $100 towards the food bank. In Tyberee's name, I am Tyberee Fall, in honor of Congressman John Lewis.
Thank you all. Tears. So we want to complete today's program with a song, but I wanted to say thank you to everyone who gave us food and donated money, and to the McKinney Center and the town of Jonesboro, and to Jared Christian, who's running our sound and stream. We thank him too. And then I will go ahead and welcome up Ubanibi Afia Shorts, who lead us in Lift Every Voice and Sing. So at home, and if you're here, you have a lyrics in your hand, keep your mask on and join us in singing. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be asked to sing a song that's still as poignant as it was when it was written over 120 years ago by James Weldon Johnson. And please join me. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on